Did you know? But we don't do dinosaurs. No, we don't do dinosaurs. No, we don't do dinosaurs. No, we don't do dinosaurs. So, you know how I'm like really good on guitar? Well, I actually started out playing the drums, and incidentally, Dave Grohl is my hero. He's a legend. Seriously, I love Dave Grohl so much. And yes, Mrs. Soup knows how I feel. Anyway, this is me around 16 or 17 years old when I first started playing the drums, and this is what it sounded like. Now, ever since day one, I've had to contest with the notion that drums are primal, simple, wild and easy. Even a monkey could do it. Drums are frequently portrayed as the most basic of instruments, coming from the jungle. And therefore drummers are basic musicians. Drummers are frequently misunderstood. As the old joke goes, what do you call someone who makes a lot of noise and hangs around with musicians? A drummer. Now, to be fair, you can hit almost anything and create a rhythm. We can be almost certain that our ancient ancestors knew this, but drumming on something does not make it a drum. A drum is probably best described as a membranophone. That is to say that a drum works by vibrating a membrane that has been stretched over a frame. Typically the frame is circular or cylindrical. The frame can act to funnel the sound, but it is the extent to which the membrane is stretched that changes the quality of the sound of the drum. Typically, this is achieved by intricate lacing, or in modern drums, clamps, and it's far from simple. One of the earliest known drums comes from the Dawen-Kao Neolithic culture in China. These drums were made of alligator skin stretched over baked clay cylinders, and it seems that around the world the earliest evidence for drums comes from the Neolithic. Some suggest that this is when people developed the skills for making drums, but I'll return to that at the end of the video. A hint of Neolithic drumming in Britain was discovered in Folkestone, North Yorkshire, in 1889. A prehistoric barrow was opened by William Greenwell, and inside he found 3 chalk objects, carved very much like drums. Though they aren't drums, notice how it looks as though string or sinew is stretching a skin over the top. It seems highly likely that Neolithic drums started out as jars, vessels for food and drink. Though it is possible, for example, to hollow out a tree to make a drum, Neolithic people were surrounded by pots, and it probably didn't take long for them to notice the way in which sound reverberated around the inside of a pot. Pots could be used to make drums. Indeed, to this day, one of the most popular designs for a drum is the Goblet Drum, named after a cup shape. This style of drum is probably the most common throughout the world, and civilizations from ancient Mesopotamia to ancient Egypt have employed the goblet drum. In ancient Greece, a different type of drum was developed, and in turn this drum was used by the Romans, a hand drum known as a tympanum. And around about the same time, in northern Vietnam, a different type of drum was being made out of bronze. The so-called Dongsung Drum is a remarkable drum, made entirely of metal and typically intricately decorated. Now, I have hardly scratched the surface, or indeed the skin, of the history of drums, or indeed their uses in the army, for example, and their remarkable variety, for example, the talking drums of West Africa. However, throughout time, the essence of the drum has remained the same. Drums are undeniably some of our oldest instruments, and though the evidence starts in the Neolithic, there is good reason to presume that people as far back as the Paleolithic were making nets and string capable of holding a drum together. But another instrument, likely from the Paleolithic, is the flute. Made from the bones of birds, likely flutes are found from across Europe, dating back to around 40,000 years ago. Yet flutes do not have the same primitive associations as drums. A flautist is respected. Indeed, parents will happily brag about their children playing the flute. The flute is seen as civilized, whereas drums are too often dismissed as primitive. Whereas I would argue, as you might expect, that drums are more complex than they seem, and they represent a desire to make a noise that's more than simply hitting something, anything. That sounds rather civilized to me.